Hey everybody, this is Mr. Huang again. Today we're going to be starting project number 2. For project number 2, we're really going to be concentrating on making your artwork look like there's more depth. When I'm talking about depth, we're trying to make our artwork look like there's more space in your picture. Let me explain it a little better. So usually when young children draw, they draw something like a house or they draw grass. So you might have seen somebody draw something like this, or you might have drawn like this before, where you have a line that goes all across the paper, and on that line, you draw some houses using your basic shapes, and all the houses just get lined up next to each other perfectly. Where you have one house next to the next house, and sometimes these houses don't even look different. They might be the same shape, might be the same height even. And then they might add details to them. What I'm trying to get at right now is that this picture looks very flat, meaning that you can't really tell where the space is. You can't tell which house is closer to you than the next house. So for this project, what we're going to be working on is trying to create different levels of space in our artwork. Even though we're working on something flat like a piece of paper, we can still make it look like things are further away or closer to the viewer. So that's what we're really going to be working on in this project, creating some depth in your artwork with 3 things known as foreground, middle ground, and background. With your sheet of paper, you're going to put it in landscape orientation. That means that it's going to be wider than it is tall. Or some of you might still call it hot dog. Either way, you're going to take this and you're going to fold it into thirds. That means you're going to try to make 3 equal spaces. So first, I'm going to turn it like this and fold it. Make sure it's straight. And then I'm going to open it up. And then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to take the end and fold it to where that line is from the first fold that I made. And it doesn't have to be perfectly even into thirds, but you want to make it close. So right here, I'm just going to fold it into thirds so you have 3 parts, 1, 2, and 3. After you fold your paper into thirds, what we're going to do is we're going to use one side for the foreground, one side for the middle ground, and one side for the background. Now, foreground means that there are things in the front of your picture. That means those are going to be the things that look closest to you. For this part, I'm going to draw something, and I'm going to start down here on the bottom of this section, and things are going to get taller in the second section. So for the foreground, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make something simple. You can choose to put whatever you want in this, but I'm just going to demonstrate with really simple drawings, and I'm just going to do a little line drawing right now. And I'll explain to you what we're going to do with it later. So first, I'm going to start all the way on the side near the bottom, and I'm just going to draw some bushes. And I'm going to stop when it touches the end of section 1. For my middle ground section right here in the middle of my paper, I'm going to draw something else, but I'm going to make it taller this time. So I'm going to draw some buildings in the second section. So I can draw up the line. I'm just drawing the outline right now. I'm not adding any details to it. And I'm going to stop when it gets to the end of the second section. After you do that, you're not going to draw anything in the third section, which is going to be your background. And I'll explain to you why later also. But after you draw your foreground section, starting down at the bottom, and then your middle ground going towards the top, but not all the way to the top, you're going to get a pair of scissors and you're going to cut that line out just like this. After you do this, your picture should be cut out, and it should start from the left. It should be shorter, and it gets taller in the middle ground area, and in the background area, you should not have cut anything out of that piece yet. So that's lesson 1 for the next project. Now that we're going to start lesson 2 for project number 2, I want to review what we did in lesson 1 really quickly. So in lesson 1, we created this little cutout from our paper showing the foreground, middle ground, and background. For lesson 2, we're really going to put this together by folding it a certain way so you can see the differences between foreground, middle ground, and background. Now, I want to show you this again really quick. In lesson 1, I talked about how young children usually draw things like this where things are side by side and you can't see the different space in it. Well, in this project, when you get your paper that you folded from lesson 1, you're going to fold it a certain way to really distinguish each foreground, middle ground, and background space. So the way you do that is you just put it out like you had it originally. You're going to take your foreground section and fold it over in front of your middle ground. And then you're going to take the background side that we didn't do anything to, and you're going to fold it backwards like this. So now your picture will look like this. For lesson 2, what you're going to do is you're going to add details to each section of your foreground, middle ground, and background. Now the reason we're doing it this way is because if I do just the foreground first and keep it folded like this, I know that I don't need to draw anything down here behind it because it will get covered up or overlap that part of the middle ground. So I'm going to start off with the foreground first, and I'm just going to add some details. So before I said these were bushes. For this part, I want you just to use a pencil because for the next part, you're really going to finish it off with the details. But while you're doing this part of the project, you want to be able to erase just in case you make some mistakes or you want to make adjustments to your project as you go along. So I'm going to work on the foreground right now by adding more details to it, just with a pencil. So now that I've drawn my details for the foreground, I'm going to do something by tracing around the edges very softly. Very softly, you're going to trace around those edges and go off the side. Then you can open it up. The reason why you're tracing it right here is now you know you don't need to draw anything below that traced line because that's going to be overlapped with your foreground. So now that you open it up and you have your traced line, you're going to begin adding details to your middle ground area that's above your traced line. So I made some buildings, so I'll just draw more details with the pencil once again, just in case I make any mistakes or want to make adjustments. When I'm finished adding details to the middle ground, I'm going to close the fold again, and then I'm going to do like I did in the first step where I traced lightly around the cutout of the foreground. I'm going to do the same thing and lightly trace the middle ground very softly. Now that you're finished tracing the middle ground, you're going to open the whole thing up again, like this, and you can fold this around. Now remember, this traced line is to show you that there's no need to draw below the traced line because that's going to be overlapped by the middle ground. So what you're going to do for the background is you're going to add details above your traced line. So I can add things like clouds, sun, the moon, airplanes, anything, birds, things that you can find in your background. So for me, I'm going to work on my sky. When you're done adding your details for the background, you can fold it all up. And you're going to be finished with lesson number 2. Today we're going to be finishing up our project number 2. Taking a look back at lesson number 2, we looked at our project and added details that we cut out from lesson 1. So right here we have drawn with a pencil our details in the foreground, the middle ground, and the background, and then we folded it back up. An artist often has to refine their work. That means they have to make adjustments. They have to take a look at it and see what worked for them and things that didn't work for them, things that they liked or they don't like now, because your mind's going to change all the time. So I'm just looking back at this. This is the refinement stage of your project where you're going back and you can kind of see what you like and don't like, and you can make changes. Luckily, we did this with a pencil, and I can erase things if I want to change or make adjustments. So let's just say I'm going to just change this a little bit. Didn't really like the way my sun was looking. Some of my clouds, I can change some of those. Add a couple more if I want. So you can add, subtract, or make any minor adjustments that you need to during this time. Maybe I want to add more details to some of these windows. And then this is the time where you can also start adding color to your picture. So I'm just gonna finish up this with some coloring. I'm gonna trace with a Sharpie, and then I'm gonna color it in with some color pencils and crayons. Well, that's the end of project number 2. I hope you enjoyed this project. Remember, this is just an example of a foreground, middle ground, and background. You can add whatever you like to it and use whatever materials you like to make your project number 2. I look forward to seeing everybody's project turned in, and I hope you have fun. Bye-bye.